Hey classes, welcome back, and everybody welcome to 7th grade science. I figured today could double as one of those videos that goes along with what we did in class today and an introduction to how things work here in 7th grade science in room B1. So let's jump on in. If you look at the date and the board behind me, pretty typically when the students come on in, you'll see two panels of the three panels that are up here written on with notes, and a lot of the notes you'll see have these little dots on them, like 3 dots. That's for the students to fill something in there. For parents and guardians checking at home, if you want to see what's going on in the science class, you can count on there being something to write down each and every day. Used to do the old notebooks by page number, used to put in a table of contents and so forth. I find it much easier to go by date, especially now that we're all on campus on the same day all the time, whereas last year when we had the hybrid learning, it was kind of staggered. So just look for a date and all the notes or the lab that goes along with that day. Today, jumping on in, we started with energy and chemical reactions. The focus of 7th grade science is mainly biology, and with the new standards, they throw in some engineering. And the two go along together because we talk about genetic engineering, we talk about the type of engineering that has resulted in things like polymers that are in our oceans, and that's really important for environmental science, which we cover quite a bit here in this class. And for our brain pop, our introduction today on the brain pop was about potential and kinetic energy. This will go along with our next lab. Our next lab has to do with pendulums, and it goes through some of the forces, the gravity forces, the friction forces, and then also potential and kinetic energy. Potential, of course, is when it's getting ready to fall. Kinetic is when it's in motion, when it's actually moving. So kinetic means movement. We're talking about kinetic energy today in class. Pretty typically, we went on from there to a little bit, the lecture part, which I try and keep to about 10 minutes. I don't guarantee 10 minutes, but just like these YouTube videos that I put out there, I've got my 10-minute timer to keep me somewhat honest on this one. And really it's because, again, keep it in line with how much time you should be taking notes versus actually exploring the labs and doing some exploration with your groups. Today, that exploration had to do with a Feynman, or Richard Feynman, example that he had given a long time ago in a book. I used to use the same example with Legos, but I'm borrowing Richard Feynman's. Richard Feynman in particular is a scientist. I'll link him down in the comments down below, as a matter of fact, or in the description. But he was talking about explaining the conservation laws, really the critical laws to understanding everything in physics and in chemistry. And the long and the short of it was his particular example had to do with blocks. In his example, the blocks represented atoms, and if you can imagine a preschool or an after-school care or something with little kids, as long as you imagine that these blocks can't be destroyed, they can't be broken. And if you have a box, say, of 100 blocks, of course they represent atoms, as long as none of them accidentally went home in a backpack or went out a window, at the end of the day, especially if you have kids, they're going to be all over the room, they might be underneath things, they might be in cabinets and everything, but at the end of the day, you still have your 100 blocks. This goes along with conservation laws, for example, in terms of conservation of mass. Obviously, the blocks represent when you have a chemical reaction, you can mix them in lots of different ways. You can mix the atoms up in lots of different ways, but no matter what, you always end up with the same amount of elements that you began with in a chemical reaction, the same amount of atoms. And same with energy. There's also a conservation law in energy, which we'll get to in a second. The long and the short of it was when we talked a little bit at the beginning of class, all the way back to the Big Bang, to now, 14 billion years ago to now, we talked about how energy never really goes away in our universe. It simply changes form all the time. And talking about the daycare, just a background on Mr. Forbes here, I've had 2 students through the Pacifica School District. My daughter, I'm wearing her lanyard from Mercy High School right now, as a matter of fact. My lanyard went south, so I'm like, I'll borrow my daughter's. She's off at college now. She graduated from the Pacifica School District a couple of years ago, went through high school, and now she's off in college. So I'm missing my girl, and if you check out Valley Mar School, that's where my son goes right now. So I certainly am local in terms of having a couple of students in the district. I'm very happy about that. And if you look at the Pacifica School District, I've spent about 7 years in the district. And if you look at the classroom I'm in here right now, B1, I keep it nice and open for your students. There's a door on this side and a door on the other side and 2 windows also on the corners. So of course, with masking up, Obviously, when students are here, I have a mask on, and we always have the windows open and the fans going and the air conditioning system going. So we're making sure it's as safe as it can possibly be for your students here with COVID-19. All right, moving on to the notes today. Again, I want to kind of walk you through a typical day. The students would have our introduction, going through the notes, again, putting this in their notebook. Tomorrow, for example, we're going to have a lab that goes along with it. Sometimes it might be a lab, sometimes it might be a video clip. A couple of days ago, for example, we went outside and we looked at things around campus that were alive. We were trying to get categories going of things that are living on campus because it goes along exactly with our curriculum. So I'm going to spin the whiteboard here. You can see the mess behind the whiteboard there. You can see the rest of the notes that were up here. Now, on the notes today, we in particular, being the first day of the week, it's a Tuesday, but of course we had Monday off for Labor Day, we have our 10 key terms. Most of the times at the beginning of the week, the students will have 10 key terms, 10 definitions to do in their notebooks. Important thing about the notebooks, and put on the glasses here and grab a notebook from last year. This is mine, it's a binder. It doesn't have to be a binder. A 3-ring binder is what I used to always insist on, but a spiral bound notebook is fine. But if you check out the binder right here, you can see the notes, they go by date. If any time a student misses the notes for any reason, they can usually find them in 3 places. 1, I'll email them home. 2, it should be in their Google Classroom a day or 2 after class. And 3, and this is most important for parents and guardians, it's at pacificascience.org. All that is a blog that I maintain. I pay a few dollars a year so that it doesn't have advertisements on it. And the idea is a counselor or another teacher can easily just go to that blog, see the latest notes that have been written and put in there, and you can check out, hey, what should be in my son or daughter's notebook. Okay, moving on to the key terms. These were our 10 for this week. Most of these came straight out of our textbook. We have a textbook that's in class, and also the other textbooks that we're going to use that are called consumables that the students can write in the actual book, those are also kept in class too. They will be able to take them home if they want to, but most of the time we should be able to do most of our labs in class, most of the textbook work in class, which gets to the point that the journals that the students are keeping are the most important part. They're cumulative. As we go through our 30-plus weeks of the school year, there might be something on week 10 where we refer back to, say, week 2. That's why it's important for students to keep a good notebook. And anytime he or she is out of class, hey, just go back and see what you missed. These were our 10 key terms today. The one had up here, chemical reaction. We had an extra little star next to it because tomorrow in class we'll be talking about one of the key chemical reactions that we talk about throughout the year. So I have a little star next to it. I'd definitely spend another day or 2 talking about it because it's so important, which is, of course, life science photosynthesis. So we're going to talk a lot about photosynthesis in this class. Moving on from there, the example here on energy transfer, I ended up with surfing down here. I try and keep my YouTube videos that I put out there, and I try and put out 2 or 3 a week. I try and keep the YouTube videos as local as possible. Lots of local things to talk about around here, geology-wise, life science-wise, especially with the ocean right next to us. And if you check out the board here, we end up with surfing as, hey, kinetic energy, things on the move. But where did that energy come from? We trace it all the way back in class when we talked about the Big Bang. Certainly not a complete list, but we talked about energy transfers all the way along, from nuclear energy to electromagnetic energy, light, all the way to heat energy, which is really kinetic energy, all the way to, okay, the kinetic energy of surfing, gravitational potential energy. The idea, getting back to the original idea of the day, I always try to make a big circle each day with the notes, that we have energy and matter changing arrangements, and energy in particular changing forms in one to another, but it never goes away in terms of our conservation laws tell us that whatever you begin with is also what you end with. And then finally, looking over here, we've got kind of a preview for tomorrow. We didn't quite get to photosynthesis here all the way today, but I wanted to preview it a little bit. Finally, regarding grading, we had our first quiz and our first spot check on the notes. Very quickly on those, we have an online quiz format. If for some reason you can't take the quiz online at home, you can also request a hard copy. The quiz, for example, this week will be made live. In other words, you can take it starting Wednesday and is due by Friday. I like this because it gives students a little extra time to use their notes and to really think about it. If you take the online format, you get to take it twice. If you didn't like your first grade, I will record the highest of the two. The computer automatically scrambles the questions and answers, so you never get the same test twice. It's the same questions, but everything's a little mixed up. Just to make sure that you don't just copy down what you did the first time exactly. They make sure that they mix up the answers, the A, B, C, and D if it's multiple choice, for example. Sometimes, too, it's also type in answers. And then there's also one spot check. Now, this keeps students honest. I used to collect the notebooks, but you can imagine collecting upwards of 100 notebooks can get a little bit tough every week. So I started doing a thing that works out, I think, really well for the students and myself is a spot check where the students send in a picture. I'm getting my camera going there. Students send in a picture of the notes from one day that week, which I'll specify during the week. So it's obviously to the student's advantage to make sure you're keeping up with the notebook. For example, this week, I haven't yet told the students which day I'm going to do the spot check on. Hint, hint, it's going to be today if you're listening. So if you check out the spot check, I'll say, hey, just make sure you take a picture of your key terms. Usually it's the key terms. And email it to me. You can email it to me through Jupyter, through my classroom, which is, of course, sforbes@pacificasd.org. The point being, that's the spot check each week, and then the online quiz each week. The online quiz is a check of the notes, and it's also a check for understanding. And the last thing I'll say about that is really, especially in 7th grade, try and reframe perhaps what you might think of in terms of tests. When we do tests in 8th grade and high school, certainly that helps with placement. 8th grade tests, especially 8th grade grades, help with placement in high school, whether you're going to a school in our district, whether you're going to a private school, somewhere completely different. You want to make sure that your 8th grade grades are reflective of what you're doing so that the high school can place you properly. High school grades obviously are important for college if you go to a college or trade school. In terms of 7th grade, I'd like you to really consider the grades not to be like, hey, here's your grade, this is what you get, but in terms of feedback. Say, hey, if you didn't quite get the grade you wanted on a test, what can we adjust in terms of study habits, in terms of how we take the notes, in terms of what we do, to make sure that we are getting the concepts. If you did get the grade you like, let's make sure we do more of that and keep those habits going. Really looking forward to your discovery in 7th grade science. I love science, and we will be doing lots of biology and engineering as we go through the next 35 weeks, I believe it is. Take care, and I'll see you online. Bye-bye.